I never liked hospitals. All my life, I've tried to stay away from them. 73 years old and not a single serious illness, except for a broken leg when I was young. Even colds, I was on my feet. My father lived to be 88 without ever going to the hospital. Genes, I guess. I was always proud of my health, and I was sure I would die just like him, just not wake up one morning. I saw a doctor once a year, a formal checkup required to renew my insurance. It usually took no more than half an hour. A polite conversation, the standard tests, a handshake goodbye, and I was free for another year. Something went wrong this time. Dr. Pierce looked at my test results for too long. He frowned as he reread the data, then scrutinized the cardiogram. I was starting to get nervous. Mr. Collins, he finally said, taking off his glasses, I have some unpleasant news. I straightened in my chair, feeling my back muscles tense. What is it? You have a serious heart problem. Pre-infarction. I'm surprised you haven't felt any symptoms. I shrugged. Occasional shortness of breath when climbing stairs. Nothing unusual for my age. What about chest pains, dizziness, weakness? A couple times. I chalked it up to age. Dr. Pierce shook his head. You need immediate hospitalization, Mr. Collins. Today, your vitals indicate a heart attack could happen at any moment. But I feel fine, I tried to argue. It's a deceptive sensation. The doctor was adamant. If you don't want to end up on the operating table with a full-blown heart attack or worse, you should go to the hospital immediately. I didn't say a word. The thought of hospitalization was panic-inducing. Who would water my roses? Who would pick up the mail? Who would check to see if the house had burned down? Do you have someone who could help? The doctor asked, as if he had read my mind. Relatives? Friends? I thought about my friends. Most of them were long dead. Others were in nursing homes or with their children in other states. After I retired, my social circle gradually narrowed to casual conversations with store clerks and the neighbor 2 houses down, whom we said hello to, but never visited. That left Andrew. My son. We hadn't spoken in, how long? Almost 2 years. The last time he called was Christmas Day, a brief, formal conversation. Before that, we saw each other at the funeral of his aunt, my sister-in-law. Andrew had arrived late, stood by the grave with an absent look, and left right after the ceremony, citing urgent business. There's a son, I finally answered. Good, Pierce nodded. Call him. Explain the situation. You're going to need support. I promised, even though I'd already decided in my gut that I could handle it on my own. I'd been self-reliant all my life, and I wasn't about to change that now. But that evening, sitting in the chair in front of the TV, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Not too strong, but frightening. It radiated into my left arm, just like Dr. Pierce described. The pain went away quickly, but it left behind a clammy, cold fear. I picked up my phone and found my son's number. Andrew answered after the 5th ring. Dad? I could hear the surprise in his voice. Had something happened? I swallowed. Even after all these years, it bothered me that my son only called when he needed something, and was sure I was doing the same. I'm having health problems, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The doctor insists on hospitalization. I thought, you should know. A pause. I heard some voices in the background. Music. What's wrong with you? Heart. Pre-infarction. Damn it, Dad, this is serious. I know it is. Adrian, are you at the hospital yet? No. The doctor wants me to go in today, but, why are you still at home? Andrew interrupted. If the doctor says I need to be hospitalized immediately, then that's what I need to do. I didn't say anything. My son's sudden concern took me by surprise. Yeah, don't want to go to the hospital, I finally said. I'll manage at home. Don't be silly. There was a familiar patronizing tone in Andrew's voice. You can't ignore these things at your age. At my age, I could feel the irritation rising. I'm perfectly... Listen, he interrupted again. I'll be there. I'll be at your place in an hour. Pack for the hospital. He was out before I could object. I sat staring at the phone in my hand. Andrew was coming to see me. For the first time in months. No, years. He must be really anxious. It was both warming and alarming at the same time. Our relationship had never been easy, especially since Laura's death. Laura had died when Andrew was 12. Cancer took her in 6 months, turning a blossoming woman into a haggard shadow. I was left alone with a teenage son who blamed the whole world for his mother's death. And most of all, me. Perhaps he was right. I noticed something was wrong with Laura too late. She'd been complaining of fatigue for months, but we chalked it up to work pressure. When she finally went to the doctor, it was too late. After she died, I went straight to work. An air traffic controller can't afford to be distracted by personal problems. The cost of making a mistake is too high. And Andrew stayed home alone, or with a babysitter he hated. We grew further and further apart. By the time Andrew was 16, he was already in trouble with the police. Petty theft, disorderly conduct, alcohol. At 18, his first serious fight almost ended up in jail. I got him out again and again, paid the fines, negotiated with the police, hired lawyers. By 20, he had settled down a bit, but our relationship was already hopelessly damaged. We communicated formally like strangers. Andrew left Clearwater, moved to Tampa. He didn't call much, came back even less. Married, divorced, changed jobs a dozen times. He was 45 now. As far as I knew, he worked for a logistics company, lived alone. He didn't have any kids. Maybe it was for the best. I wasn't sure he'd make a good father. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my memories. I struggled to rise from my chair, feeling the fingers on my left hand go numb. Maybe Dr. Pierce was right after all. Andrew was standing on the doorstep tall, with bald spots on his temples, with an emerging paunch under his shirt. He looked like me when I was his age. Same chin line, same eyes. Not for the first time, I thought genetics was a strange thing. We were so similar on the outside, but so different on the inside. "You look lousy," he said instead of greeting me. "Hello to you too," I said, letting him into the house. Andrew looked around the living room, as if expecting to see a change. But it was the same as before, the same books on the shelves, the same pictures on the walls, the same worn couch. "Did you pack?" he asked. "No." "Why?" "Because I'm not going anywhere," I answered, crossing my arms over my chest. Andrew sighed. "Dad, don't be a baby. The heart is serious. I know it is, but I'm not a helpless old man. If anything happens, I'll call an ambulance." "What if you don't call an ambulance in time? What if you pass out?" I didn't answer. I'd already made that argument to myself. "Look," Andrew took a step toward me. "I understand. No one wants to go to the hospital, but it's necessary. The doctors know what they're doing." I looked at my son with suspicion. "Since when do you care about my health?" He flinched. "Let's not fight. But I'm still not going to the hospital." "You are," Andrew said firmly. "I'll force you into the car if I have to." I grinned. Despite the years, I was still in good shape. I'd watch him try to drag me somewhere by force. "Dad," Andrew's voice softened. "Please, I'm worried about you." I studied his face, trying to see if he was sincere. The tired eyes, the wrinkles at the corners of his lips, the crease between his eyebrows. My son hadn't been a boy for a long time. When had that happened? I blinked, feeling a sudden burning sensation in my eyes. "I'll help you," Andrew continued. "I'll visit, bring you anything you need. I'll keep an eye on the house." "Promise?" I asked quietly. "I promise," he nodded. We stared at each other, two stubborn men, bound by blood but separated by years of misunderstanding. "Okay," I finally gave in. "I'll pack my things." Andrew smiled with obvious relief. "Great. I'll call the hospital and let them know we're on our way." While I was packing, Andrew walked around the house looking at the pictures on the walls. He stopped at a picture of the three of us, me, Laura, and little Andrew, standing on the beach. "Do you remember that day?" I asked, coming out of the bedroom with my bag. Andrew shook his head. "No. Was I about 4 years old?" "Andrew, 3.5. Your first time out in the ocean? You were afraid of the waves." "Were you?" He leaned over to get a better look at the picture. "I look happy here. Laura taught you how to jump over the waves. You were laughing so hard." I stopped talking, feeling a lump in my throat. Memories of times when we were happy were always hard to come by. Andrew turned away from the picture. "Ready?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. On the drive to the hospital, we were silent. Andrew drove the car with concentration, and I stared out the window at the streets of Clearwater floating by. The evening sun was golden on the tops of the palm trees, coloring the sky orange. Beautiful. I suddenly thought I might be seeing this sunset for the last time. You know, Andrew said suddenly, not taking his eyes off the road, I was going to call you this weekend. Yeah? I turned to him. Yeah. I wanted to tell you something. What was it? He paused. I met a woman. A serious relationship. First one in years. That's great, I said carefully, surprised by this sudden revelation. Her name is Sylvia. She's special. I nodded, not knowing what to say. Andrew had never shared the details of his personal life with me. I want you to meet her, he added, giving me a quick glance. When you're better. I'd love to, I replied, feeling a strange warmth inside. Maybe this unexpected illness was really a chance to make things right, to start over, to learn to be father and son, not just two people randomly connected by blood. At the entrance to the hospital, Andrew stopped the car and turned to me. I'll check you in and then I'll park. Wait here. I nodded, watching him take a quick step toward the doors of the emergency room. Tall, confident. My son. How many times over the years had I wondered where I'd gone wrong? What did I do wrong? Could I have been a better father? Probably. But after Laura died, I just did the best I could. Maybe that wasn't enough. Or maybe some wounds just don't heal with time. But now, sitting in the car outside the hospital, I suddenly felt like we still had a chance. Andrew was here. He promised to help. He wanted me to meet his woman. It was a sign that not all was lost. I got out of the car, holding my duffel bag, and slowly made my way to the entrance of the hospital. My left arm was starting to feel numb again, but it didn't scare me as much now. I hadn't agreed to be hospitalized just because I was afraid of dying alone. I agreed because I wanted to live. I wanted to see how Andrew and I would turn out. I wanted to give us another chance. The hospital room was better than I expected. It was spacious, with 2 beds, a big window, and a private bathroom. Andrew helped me unpack, talked to the nurse about visiting hours, wrote down the ward number. Sure enough, Tom, I'll come back tomorrow, he said as he was about to leave. I'll bring your books and reading glasses. I thanked him, trying not to show how touched I was by his concern. It was the longest conversation we'd had in years without recriminations or old grudges. Is there anything else you need? Andrew asked at the door. No, thank you. Everything I need is here. He nodded, paused for a second, as if he wanted to add something. But then he just said, See you tomorrow, Dad. See you tomorrow, I said, watching the door close behind him. Once I was alone, I looked around. The second bed in the room was empty, but there was a book and a glass of water on the nightstand next to it, which meant I had a roommate, just temporarily absent. I hoped he would be quiet and unsociable. The prospect of sharing space with a stranger didn't make me too happy. The nurse, a young woman with short red hair and a Jenny name tag, came in to take my blood pressure and temperature. She explained that I would be seen by the doctor on duty tonight and a cardiologist would be in tomorrow morning. Try to get some rest, Mr. Collins, she said, adjusting my pillow. You need to conserve your strength. I wanted to say that at 73 I was still strong enough, but I didn't. It was useless to argue with the nursing staff, especially on the first day. After the nurse left, I turned on the TV that hung on the wall opposite my bed. The local news was on. A fire in the suburbs, a new shopping center, a weather report. Normal Clearwater life went on, and here I lay, hooked up to a monitor tracking my heartbeat. It was a strange feeling, knowing that your heart could stop at any moment. I never really thought much about death. It seemed distant, abstract. Even when Laura was dying, even when I sat by her bedside, holding her hand, watching the life slowly leave her body, death remained a stranger. It had taken my wife, but it hadn't touched me. Now, however, death seemed close, real. I could feel its presence in the quiet beeping of the monitor, in the sterile smell of the room, in the sympathetic glances of the nurse. The door opened, interrupting my gloomy thoughts. A tall, thin man about my age, with a mop of gray hair and lively blue eyes, entered the room. Ah, the new neighbor, he exclaimed when he saw me. My name is Hugh. Hugh Barnett. Richard Collins, I introduced myself, shaking his outstretched hand. Nice to meet you, Richard. Hugh sat down on his bed. How long have you been here? Just got here. Lucky with the room. The view from the window is great. You can see the park and a bit of the bay. Beautiful sunsets in the evenings. I nodded, not knowing what to say to this flood of friendliness. How long have you been here? I asked to keep the conversation going. 3 weeks. Hugh waved his hand. Heart failure. Nothing fatal, but it needs monitoring. And you? Pre-infarction. I see. Hugh nodded. Well, then we're fellow sufferers, you and I. Two old heartbreakers. He smiled and I smiled back. There was something comforting about this man-openness, sincerity, a lack of the sullen seriousness with which many older people regard their illnesses. Are you a local? Hugh continued. Yes, all my life in Clearwater. And you? I'm from Orlando. I came to visit my daughter and ended up in the hospital. He chuckled. Not a good visit. We talked until the doctor on duty, Dr. Chen, a young Asian man with an attentive gaze and calm, confident movements. He examined me, studied my chart, made some notes. Everything is going well, Mr. Collins, he said. Tomorrow you will be examined by Dr. Allen, our leading cardiologist. He'll determine your treatment strategy. I nodded, grateful for his professionalism and the lack of condescension with which many doctors spoke to elderly patients. After dinner, surprisingly decent for a hospital meal, Hugh turned on the TV. There was a baseball game on. Do you follow the season? He asked. Not really, I admitted. Sometimes I watch Rays games, but not regularly. And I'm a fan. Hugh stepped forward enthusiastically. 40 years for the Giants. Can you imagine how excited I was when they finally took the series? We watched the match, commenting on lucky kicks and controversial referee decisions. Hugh was a pleasant conversationalist, lively but not intrusive. He knew when to talk and when to just enjoy the game in silence. By the end of the evening, I caught myself thinking that I had almost forgotten about my illness in the hospital room. For the first time in a long time, I had spent a few hours in the company of someone I felt comfortable with. Do you have a family, Richard? Hugh asked me when the match was over and we were getting ready for bed. A son, I replied. Andrew, 45 years old, lives in Tampa. It's good to have loved ones. My Catherine died 8 years ago. I have a daughter, Sharon. She and her husband have been taking care of me since I got sick. Lucky to have a daughter, I said. Anne. Yes, very, Hugh smiled. And your son, is he going to visit you? He should be here tomorrow. I tried to make my voice sound confident, but some part of me doubted whether Andrew would keep his promise. Too many times over the years, he'd disappointed me. The morning began with nursing rounds, taking my blood pressure and temperature. Breakfast, oatmeal, toast, and decaf tea seemed bland. Hugh, oddly enough, ate his portion with gusto. The secret is not to compare it to home-cooked food, he explained, noticing my skeptical look. It's just fuel for the body, nothing more. After breakfast, Dr. Allen came in, a tall, gray-haired man with bushy eyebrows and a piercing gaze. He examined me carefully, asking a lot of questions about my lifestyle, diet, and exercise. You have a serious situation, Mr. Collins, he said, studying the results of the examination. But with proper treatment and compliance with all recommendations, the prognosis is favorable. We will start with drug therapy. We will observe the dynamics. It is possible that minimally invasive intervention, stenting, will be required, but it is too early to talk about it. I nodded, feeling strangely relieved. At least now I knew what I was dealing with. How long will I spend here? I asked. At least a week, maybe more. It depends on how your body responds to the treatment. After the doctor left, Hugh patted me on the shoulder. Alan is the best cardiologist in this hospital. You're a lucky man. I tried to smile, but my thoughts had already returned to Andrew. He promised he'd be here today. Bring my books and my glasses. I glanced at the clock hanging on the wall of the ward. Visiting hours started at 10 in the morning. 10 o'clock passed, then 11. At noon, I dialed my son's number. Long beeps, then an answering machine. Andrew, it's me. You promised you'd come. I hesitated, not knowing what to say next. Call me back when you can. I disconnected, feeling the familiar bitterness of disappointment. What had I expected? That one visit to the hospital would be enough to change everything? Hugh, noticing my mood, suggested a game of cards. He had a tattered deck that he said he hadn't parted with in years. Poker or blackjack? He asked. Poker, I answered, grateful for the distraction. We played, making symbolic bets a dime a game. Hugh turned out to be a gambler with a good poker face. To my surprise, the time flew by. After lunch, I called Andrew again. It went to voicemail again. Maybe something's happened to him, I said to Hugh, trying to justify my son to his new acquaintance. And to myself. Maybe, Hugh agreed, though I could see in his eyes that he didn't believe it. In the evening, as visiting time drew to a close, I gave up. Andrew wasn't coming. Not today, not tomorrow. All his promises were empty words. The kids, Hugh sighed as I shared my disappointment with him. They don't realize that one day will be gone, and all the unspoken words, all the missed calls, all the missed appointments, all of it will be impossible to get back. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. We have a complicated relationship, I said. We always have been. Tell me about it, Hugh suggested. Sometimes it helps to talk it out. So I did. About Laura's death, about how hard it had been to raise a teenage son alone, about his rebellion, about his trouble with the law, about our gradual drifting apart. Hugh listened attentively, not interrupting, only nodding or frowning occasionally. When I had finished, he looked thoughtfully out of the window, where the sun was already setting. You know, Richard, he said at last, maybe it's not just your wife's death. Sometimes the problems start much earlier, and we just don't see them. And then something serious happens. A death, an illness, a divorce, and all the cracks inside become visible. I was silent, pondering his words. I'm not saying you're a bad father, Hugh continued, but maybe there were things you didn't notice or didn't think were important. Like what? Hugh shrugged his shoulders. I don't know. It's your life, your son. It's just, sometimes you have to look deeper. Think about the years when Laura was alive. Were there any problems you were ignoring even then? I leaned back on the pillow, closing my eyes. Were there problems? Of course there were. All families have problems. I worked hard. 12-hour shifts, often nights. Laura complained that I wasn't home much. Andrew complained too, though less often. Children quickly get used to their father's absence if it becomes the norm. But there were good times too. Weekends at the beach, backyard barbecues, trips to Disneyland. The ordinary life of an ordinary family. Or was it? I remembered one day when Andrew was about 9 years old, he asked, Dad, why don't you ever come to my games? I then replied something like, I work so you can have everything you need. Andrew nodded and never asked again. And I didn't even consider that my presence might have been more important to him than new sneakers or a game console. There were other moments. Conferences at school that Laura went to because I was on shift. Birthdays when I didn't show up until the end of the party, tired after work. School plays I was absent from. Little things. Individually, no big deal. Together, perhaps a lifetime of missed opportunities. You're right, I said to Hugh, opening my eyes. Maybe the problem started much earlier. And you know what the saddest part is? Hugh smiled sadly. We only realize it when it's too late to make a change. Do you think it's too late? I asked quietly. I don't know, he answered honestly. Only you and your son can decide. In the evening, I called Andrew again. This time he answered after the third ring. Dad, is something wrong? There was no guilt or remorse in his voice. It was like he hadn't promised to come over today. Like he wasn't the one who left me at the hospital without keeping his word. You promised to bring my glasses and books, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Shit, I'd completely forgotten. Sorry, Dad. I was busy at work, and then I had a meeting. I'll be there tomorrow. Don't bother, I said coldly. I'll ask the nurse to get me something from the hospital kiosk. Don't be silly. Of course I'll come. Tomorrow, I promise. How's today? Pause. I could almost see him wrinkling his nose, picking up an excuse. Dad, I've been really busy. Don't think I don't care. Of course you do, I said. I'll see you tomorrow, Andrew. I disconnected without waiting for his reply. Hugh, who was pretending to be absorbed in the TV, turned to me. Is everything all right? Yeah, I replied. He's busy. He'll be here tomorrow. Hugh nodded without comment. For that, I was grateful to him. The next morning, I asked Nurse Jenny to buy me a book from the hospital kiosk. She came back with a detective. Not the most sophisticated reading, but better than nothing. Your son hasn't arrived? She asked, holding out the book to me. Busy, I answered briefly. Jenny nodded with an understanding look in her eyes. Apparently, such situations were not new to her. The day passed in the routine of hospital life. Blood pressure, medication, doctor's rounds, lunch, medication again. Hugh entertained me with stories about his work. He was a civil engineer, involved in the design of many of Orlando's landmark buildings. Andrew didn't show up that day or the next. I stopped calling him. Pride made it impossible to beg for my own son's attention. On my fourth day in the hospital, I caught myself thinking that I had almost resigned myself to the situation. Hugh became my companion, and we spent time talking, playing cards, and watching television. I learned about his daughter Sharon, who was a lawyer, his twin grandchildren, his travels around the world. Have you ever been abroad? He asked me. No, I shook my head. I always wanted to visit Europe, but somehow it didn't work out. First work, then Laura's illness, then just life. It's never too late, Hugh said. When we get out of here, you can start with Italy. Rome, Florence, Venice. An old man like you would do well there, among the antiquities. We both laughed. On the fifth day, Hugh was visited by his daughter, a tall, elegant woman of about 45, with the same bright blue eyes as her father. She brought him homemade cookies, fresh fruit, new magazines. Hugh glowed with joy as he introduced me. Sharon, this is my new friend Richard. He's a former air traffic controller, and he's also a heart patient. Sharon shook my hand warmly. It's a pleasure, Richard. Thank you for keeping my father company. He likes to talk. It's mutual, I replied sincerely. Your father is a great conversationalist. Watching their conversation, I felt a prick of envy. They were so close, so comfortable with each other. Sharon cared for my father, but she didn't treat him like a helpless old man. There was respect, warmth, genuine affection between them. Could Andrew and I have been like that? Or did something in our history, in our life together, forever preclude that possibility? When Sharon left, Hugh noticed my pensive mood. Is something wrong? No, nothing's wrong. It's just, you and your daughter have a wonderful relationship. Hugh nodded. Yeah, we're lucky. But it wasn't always like that. I looked at him in surprise. Really? Oh, yeah. Sharon was a nightmare as a teenager. Running away from home, getting involved with bad company, almost dropping out of school. Catherine and I didn't know what to do. What happened? I asked, intrigued by this unexpected story. Hugh shrugged his shoulders. Time, patience, talking, lots of talking. And most importantly, we never stopped showing her that we loved her, no matter what. Even when she did stupid things, even when she broke our hearts with her antics, we always let her know that our door was open. I was silent, mulling over his words. Was I like that with Andrew? Had I let him know that I loved him, despite all of his mistakes? Or was I too busy with my pain, my frustration, my anger? People change, Richard, Hugh continued, especially young people. Who your son was when he was 20 doesn't necessarily determine who he'll be when he's 40. But those changes need space. They need a fresh start. Do you think I didn't give him that opportunity? Hugh thought for a moment. I don't know. But sometimes, without realizing it, we hold on to an image of someone from the past. He's always been irresponsible. She never thinks of the consequences. Such thoughts become self-fulfilling prophecies. We expect certain behaviors, and the person exhibits them because it's easier than fighting other people's expectations. I thought back to our last conversation with Andrew. Did he hear in my voice, in my words, the same things he always heard? Disappointment, judgment, lack of faith in him. Maybe that's why he didn't come. Why try when your father's already convinced you'll fail? I think I've made a lot of mistakes, I admitted. We all make them, Hugh said softly. The question is whether we are willing to correct them. That night, lying in bed, I thought about Hugh's words for a long time. That maybe the problems had started much earlier than I thought. That maybe I hadn't given Andrew a chance to change, to grow, to become a different person. I thought back to different moments in our lives, both good and bad. I tried to see them from a new perspective, not as a resentful father, but as a man seeking to understand. Maybe Andrew wasn't the perfect son, but was I the perfect father? The answer was obvious. On my seventh day in the hospital, I decided to call my son again, not to rebuke or complain, but just to talk. Perhaps a fresh start. But when I dialed his number, the phone was off. Time flows differently in the hospital. Days merge, marked not by appointments or events, but by medications, blood pressure readings, and doctor rounds. My 20th day here began as usual, with the dim light of the nightlights, the soft footsteps of the night shift nurse checking IVs and monitors. I woke up before Hugh did. The morning sun was just beginning to break through the blinds, painting streaks of light on the walls of the room. Over the weeks, I'd grown accustomed to the hospital routine, to the smells of drugs and disinfectants, to the sounds of IVs and beeping monitors. But I couldn't get used to the idea that Andrew had never once visited me. For the first few days, I called him almost every day, then less often. In the last week, not at all. His phone was often off, and when he answered, the conversation was short and strained. It was always the same. Apologies, promises to come tomorrow or on the weekend, questions about my condition, spoken in a tone of impatience. I stopped waiting. I stopped hoping. Hugh had become more of a support to me than my own son. Hugh woke up when the nurse brought breakfast. "Morning, buddy," he said, stretching. "How did you sleep?" "Fine," I replied. The nightmare that had haunted me the last few nights, alone in an empty house calling for Andrew but no answer, didn't come today, and I was grateful for the respite. After breakfast, we had a visit from Dr. Allen. He was pleased with my progress. "The medication has helped stabilize things," he said as he studied the results of the latest tests. "But your coronary arteries are still significantly narrowed. We're going to schedule you for stenting. It's a minimally invasive procedure, putting in special tubes that will keep the arteries open." "When?" I asked. "The day after tomorrow. You'll have time to prepare and deal with all the necessary issues." When the doctor left, Hugh gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Don't worry, I went through this 2 years ago. It's a standard procedure, and recovery is quick. You'll be able to walk down the hall a couple days after surgery, and you'll be discharged home in a week." I nodded, grateful for the encouragement, but my thoughts drifted in another direction. Home. What would be waiting for me at home? An empty house, dusty shelves, wilted flowers. In the afternoon, Dr. Harris, the anesthesiologist who would be involved in the surgery, visited me. A young woman with short dark hair and an attentive gaze. She asked a lot of questions about my medical condition, allergies, previous surgeries. "Do you have someone who can pick you up after you are discharged?" she asked, ending the conversation. "Relatives, friends." "My son," I answered automatically. "Good. Have him leave his contact number at the nurse's station. We'll call him when you can be picked up." I nodded, hesitant to tell the truth. What was the point of explaining to a stranger that my only son had practically abandoned me? After Dr. Harris left, I sat staring out the window at the hospital parking lot for a long time. Cars were coming and going. People were entering the hospital building with flowers and packages to visit their loved ones. Ordinary life, ordinary acts of caring. On the morning before my surgery, another doctor visited me. Dr. Ramirez, the head of the cardiology department. He was surprised to find no immediate family contacts in my chart. "Mr. Collins," he said, frowning, "do you have any relatives at all?" The question sounded so sudden that I was confused. "I have a son," I finally answered. "We need his contact number. In case of," he hesitated, "unforeseen circumstances." "Of course," I dictated Andrew's number, which the doctor had written on my chart. "Does he visit you?" Ramirez asked. "No," I decided not to lie. "He's very busy." The doctor frowned even more, but didn't say anything. The operation was a success. I woke up in the ICU, feeling a strange numbness in my chest and arms. The nurse explained that it was normal, the effects of the anesthesia. By evening, I was transferred back to the regular ward, where Hugh was waiting for me with playing cards and a new detective. "Neshwam, welcome back to the world of the living," he smiled. "Glad to be back," I replied, wondering if I was really glad. The 3 days after surgery were spent in observations, tests, and a gradual increase in physical activity. I started with short walks in the hallway, holding on to the handrail. Then I started walking on my own, then up the stairs under the supervision of the physical therapist. Andrew never called once. On the fourth day, Dr. Allen informed me that I could be discharged. "You're recovering well, Mr. Collins, but you need to follow all the recommendations. Take medication, gradually increase physical activity, eat right. You'll come back in a month for a checkup." I nodded, thinking about what was waiting for me at home. "Will your son pick you up?" the doctor asked. "No," I answered. "Friends will help." Dr. Allen nodded without commenting. Sharon arrived at noon as promised. She helped me pack, listened to the doctor's recommendations, and picked up prescriptions for medications. "I'll stop at the pharmacy on the way," she said. "Hugh will stay in the hospital for a couple more days, but he wanted me to tell you that he'll visit you as soon as he's discharged." I was touched by that concern. It was strange that strangers showed more care than my own son. Before leaving the hospital, I wondered if I should tell Andrew when he was discharged. I decided not to call. If he hadn't been interested in my condition all those days, why bother him now? The drive home took about 20 minutes. Sharon drove carefully, avoiding sharp turns and braking. We talked about the usual things, the weather, the latest news, her job. Not a word about my son, and I was grateful for that. As we turned onto my street, I felt a strange uneasiness. Something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Maybe just the excitement of coming home after being away for 3 weeks? "Right here," I said, pointing to my house. A small one-story ranch house with a white picket fence and roses along the driveway. Sharon parked at the curb, and then I saw it. There was an unfamiliar car in my driveway, a dark blue sedan, and the roses. Some of the rose bushes had been cut down, leaving unsightly gaps in the once perfect row. "Is something wrong?" Sharon asked, noticing my confusion. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Let's check it out." I got out of the car slower than I wanted to. My body was still weak from the surgery. Sharon supported me under the elbow, helping me to the door. I pulled out my keys, the only personal item I had on me when I was hospitalized, and put them in the lock. But the door was unlocked. Pushing it open, I stepped into the hallway and stopped, stunned. It was my house, but it wasn't mine at the same time. In place of the old coat rack stood a new modern design of chrome and glass. My shoes that always stood by the door were gone, replaced by several pairs of women's shoes and sneakers clearly belonging to a teenager. "Dad, is that you?" Andrew's voice came from the living room. A second later, he himself appeared in the doorway. He was wearing his homemade clothes, a t-shirt and shorts, a can of beer in his hand. "What the hell?" was all I could manage to say. "You've been discharged already?" Andrew looked surprised but not embarrassed. "Shopakikurum. Why didn't you call?" "Why would I call to go into my own house?" My voice got louder. "Andrew? Who is it?" A woman's voice from the back of the house. "My dad!" Andrew shouted over his shoulder, then turned to me. "Dad, I can explain." "I'd really like to hear it," I said, walking past him into the living room, and froze again in shock. My living room, with the furniture Laura and I had picked out together almost 40 years ago, had been completely changed. The old couch was gone, replaced by a modern leather sectional. My favorite bookcase was gone, as were most of the books. The family photos that had stood on the mantelpiece were gone, replaced by some abstract figurines and vases. In the armchair sat a woman, a thin blonde woman in her 40s with bright makeup and a wary look. On the couch, staring at her phone, sat a teenage girl with the same blonde hair. "Dad, this is Sylvia," Andrew said, "and her daughter Kira." "Sylvia, Kira. This is my father, Richard." "Nice to meet you." Sylvia smiled strainedly, not getting up from her chair. Kira didn't even look up from the phone, just mumbled something unintelligible. "Akram? What's going on here?" when I asked, looking around the room. "Where are my things?" "Dad, I can explain." Andrew looked nervous. "Why don't you sit down? You just got out of the hospital. You need to rest." "I need answers." I cut him off. "What did you do to my house?" Sharon, obviously feeling uncomfortable, said quietly, "Richard, maybe I should leave." "No," I turned back to her. "Please stay." Andrew cast a suspicious look at Sharon. "Who's that?" "The daughter of a friend of mine from the hospital," I answered. The only one who's been visiting me all these days. Andrew sighed. Dad, I told you, I explained. I've had so much to do. Yeah, I see, I interrupted, pointing to the changes in the room. Like throwing out my stuff. We didn't, Sylvia interjected. We just put it in the garage. This house needed updating. This house, I said slowly, feeling my anger boiling over, belongs to me, and I didn't ask for it to be updated. Look, Andrew took a step toward me. When you went into the hospital, I thought it would be better if someone lived here, keeping an eye on the house. And then Sylvia had trouble renting her apartment, and so you decided to invite them here without asking my permission? You were in the hospital. And Andrew raised his voice. I was trying to help. Help who? Me or your friend? Both. He ran his hand through his hair in the gesture I remembered so well. It was what he always did when he felt cornered. We thought you'd be in the hospital for a long time, and then maybe a rehab center. And who thought that? I asked, feeling my heart pounding. The doctors, Andrew answered quickly. They said you'd need long-term observation. That's strange, I squinted. That's not what they told me. Andrew averted his eyes. Maybe I misunderstood. Or maybe you're lying, I said quietly. But it was like an explosion in the room. You know what? Andrew went on the offensive. I was trying to help, I always do. And you're as unhappy as ever. This is nothing new. All my life, no matter what I did, it wasn't enough for you. That's not true, I argued, but he wouldn't listen. When Mom died, you completely shut down. You weren't there for her. Physically, yes, you came home, made dinner, checked my homework. But emotionally, you didn't exist. I lost my mom, and then I lost you. I was silent, stunned by this sudden outburst. And then when I started to rebel, Andrew continued, all you did was criticize. Never asked why I was doing this, how I felt. Just, Andrew, how could you? And Andrew, I'm disappointed. It's not true, I said quietly, though deep down I knew there was some truth in what he said. It's the goddamn truth, Andrew was almost shouting now. And you know what? I'm tired of trying to earn your approval. Tired of not being good enough. Then why are you here? I asked. Why did you move into my house? He opened his mouth, then closed it, unable to find an answer. I'll tell you why, I continued. Because it's convenient. Because it's free. Because you thought I wouldn't be back long enough for you to enjoy all the benefits without facing the consequences. Our argument ended in nothing. Andrew and Sylvia refused to move out immediately, citing that they needed time to find a new place to live. I was too exhausted after the hospital to insist on doing my own thing. Sharon tried to mediate, but the situation was so tense that she soon left, promising to call and check on me in a couple days. Thus began my new life, in my own home, but as if in someone else's. My bedroom, fortunately, was untouched, though Sylvia had cleaned up there too, rearranging the things in my closet and removing a few pictures from my nightstand. But I had to share the bathroom with 3 other people, and the kitchen and living room were completely taken over by the new tenants. The first night when I tried to cook dinner, Sylvia insisted that she would cook for everyone. You mustn't overstretch yourself after the operation, she said with subdued concern. I'll cook something light and healthy. I wanted to say no, but Andrew backed her up. Dad, don't be stubborn. You need to conserve your energy. As a result, the 4 of us had dinner at the table that Laura and I had once bought for family dinners. Sylvia had prepared some elaborate dish with quinoa and vegetables. Tasteless and, in my opinion, not nutritious enough. But I ate it all without comment, deciding to save my strength for more important battles. Andrew was behaving strangely, overprotective, then irritable. Sylvia tried to be nice, but I could see the falseness in her smile. Kira, Sylvia's daughter, hardly participated in the conversation, always staring at her phone. It seemed to me that she was as unhappy about the situation as I was. After dinner, I retired to my bedroom, the only place where I still felt like a master. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I tried to figure out how things had gotten to this point. My own son had effectively taken over my home, ignoring my wants and needs. It was painful, and it was humiliating. I wondered if I should call Hugh or Sharon, ask for help, but pride wouldn't let me. I had been on my own for too long to complain to others about my family problems now. In the morning, I woke to the sounds in the kitchen. Loud music, laughter, the noise of the coffee grinder. Sylvia and Kira were getting ready for work and school. Andrew, from what I understood from their conversation, was working remotely and staying home. I waited until Sylvia and her daughter had left before coming out of the bedroom. Andrew was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop. "Good morning, Dad," he said, not taking his eyes off the screen. "How did you sleep?" "Fine," I replied, heading for the coffee maker. "Sylvia left some oatmeal for you. She says it's good for your heart." I looked at the pot of gray mass and decided I'd rather make toast with eggs, a dish I'd had for breakfast almost every day for the past 10 years. "I think I'll decide what I want to eat," I said, opening the refrigerator. Andrew shrugged. "Suit yourself, but Sylvia tried very hard." "I appreciate her concern," I said, pulling out the eggs, "but I prefer my own habits." We ate breakfast in awkward silence. I was trying to figure out how to start a conversation about the thing that bothered me the most, my personal belongings that had disappeared from the house. Andrew," I finally decided. "You said my stuff was in the garage?" "Yes." He nodded, not looking up from his laptop. "Sylvia packed everything neatly and signed the boxes." "I'd like some things back where they belong," I said firmly, "especially family photos and books." Andrew finally looked at me. "Dad, there are 4 people living here now, not 1. We need space for our stuff too." "Ah, I understand," I said, trying to stay calm. "But some things have special meaning to me. Pictures of your mother, for example." Andrew sighed. "Okay, I'll find them and bring them back. Anything else?" "My books, vinyl records, the chess set your grandfather gave me. Dad, all this stuff takes up a lot of space." "This is my house, Andrew." I raised my voice, despite my decision to remain calm. "Sorry, my stuff has a right to be in my house." Andrew slammed the laptop shut. "You can't just go back and expect things to be your way. Sylvia and I have rights to this place now, too." "What rights?" I felt my anger boiling over. "I didn't sign any documents. I didn't agree to your living here." "But you gave me the keys," Andrew countered, "and I've been taking care of your house for 3 weeks now." "I gave you the keys to check on the house, not for you to have strangers move in." Andrew got up from the table. "Sylvia is not an outsider. She's my girlfriend, and she cares more about you than you deserve, by the way." Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I turned away silently, feeling my hands shaking with restrained emotion. "I'm sorry, Dad," Andrew's tone softened. "I didn't mean to upset you. It's just, let's find a compromise, okay? We can return some of your stuff, but not all of it. There really isn't much room." "Okay," I agreed, deciding not to escalate the situation. "I'll go to the garage and pick out what I want back." "Don't work too hard," Andrew warned me. "The doctor said you shouldn't lift weights." "I remember," I said, and went to the garage. What I saw there was a mixture of anger and pain. My belongings were piled in cardboard boxes, partly signed, partly not. Books that I had carefully collected all my life lay in disarray, some with bent pages. The vinyl record collection, my pride, was carelessly packed, which could have damaged rare copies. I spent hours in the garage sorting through things, picking out the most valuable things I wanted to bring back into the house. Laura's photos, our wedding albums, pictures of little Andrew, a few favorite books. The chess set my father gave me, an old desk lamp that belonged to my parents. When I returned to the house with the first batch of things, Andrew was no longer in the kitchen. I could hear him talking on the phone in his room, the former office I'd set up after I retired. I started arranging the photos on the mantelpiece, making room for the gaudy decorative vases Sylvia had placed there. Then I put the table lamp and a few books back in place on the shelf in the corner of the room, the only one that hadn't been removed in the renovation. Returning these items to their rightful places gave me a small but tangible satisfaction. It was as if I was reclaiming a piece of my home. Toward evening, Sylvia and Kira returned. Sylvia's lips tightened when she saw the changes in the living room, but she didn't say anything. Kira, as usual, walked by without taking her eyes off the phone. Sylvia was cooking dinner again, some diet dish with quinoa, this time with chicken breast. I ate my portion in silence, though I would have preferred a regular steak or even just a sandwich. After dinner, Andrew and Sylvia settled down on the couch to watch some TV show. I went back to my room with a book, but I couldn't concentrate on reading. My thoughts kept coming back to the situation I was in. I felt like a stranger in my own home, an uninvited guest interfering with the real owners. The next day, I decided to go out for a walk, partly to get some air, partly to avoid socializing with Andrew and Sylvia. The weather was beautiful, a typical Florida day, sunny but not too hot. I walked slowly down the familiar streets, enjoying the fresh air and freedom from the tension that permeated every corner of my home. When I returned an hour later, I heard voices from the kitchen. Andrew and Sylvia were arguing about something. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but when I heard my name, I stopped in the hallway without going into the kitchen. "He's not going to leave, Andrew," Sylvia said in an irritated tone. "You promised it was temporary, that he'd agree to a nursing home." "I thought he would," Andrew replied. "He sees he can't live alone after the operation." "But he can," Sylvia objected. "He walks, he makes his own breakfast. He even moved things out of the garage yesterday. He's not the helpless old man you described him as." He's just pretending to be stronger than he is," Andrew said. "He's always done that. Proud, stubborn, but at his age, with his heart, he can't live alone. Sooner or later, he's going to have to admit it." "And when will that be?" Sylvia sounded impatient. "A month? 2? A year? I can't wait that long. Kira has to be transferred to a new school before the semester starts, and that's in 2 weeks. We could push him to make a decision," Andrew said quietly. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Create conditions where he realizes he can't do it." "Like what?" "Like breaking the air conditioner. It's hard without it in this heat. Or," Andrew hesitated, "I don't know. Maybe start renovations that would cause a lot of noise and dust. Old people have a hard time with that kind of thing." "Andrew!" There was admiration in Sylvia's voice. "I didn't realize you were capable of such, ingenuity." "I just want us to have our own life at last," he answered. "In our own home, unattended and uncriticized." "Your own house?" Sylvia interjected. "Are you sure he'll leave it to you?" "Who else would he leave it to? I'm his only heir, and the house is practically mine already. When my father moves into a nursing home, we'll pay for his care there, and the house will be ours. That's fair." "What if he doesn't want to move? What if he insists that we move out?" "He can't kick us out," Andrew said confidently. "I checked. By law, if a person stays in a house for more than 2 weeks with the owner's knowledge, you can't just evict them. You need official notice and a court order and all that. That's a long time. Are you really willing to sue your own father over a house?" Sylvia sounded doubtful. "No, of course not," Andrew answered quickly. "But he won't want to go to court either. He'd rather agree to a compromise. For example, we pay for a good nursing home, and we keep the house." "What if he sells the house? Find a smaller apartment?" "I don't think he'd do that. Too many memories. Besides, who's going to help him move? It's not like he's got anyone but me." As I listened to this conversation, I felt a chill go down my spine. My own son was planning to practically run me out of my house, to exploit my weakness after the surgery, my loneliness, my dependence on him. I retreated quietly to the front door, then defiantly opened and closed it, giving the impression that I had just returned. The conversation in the kitchen stopped momentarily. "Dad, is that you?" Andrew called out. "Yeah," I answered, trying to make my voice sound normal. "I'm back from my walk." I walked into the kitchen where Andrew and Sylvia were sitting at the table, pretending to just drink coffee. "How was the walk?" Andrew asked with fake concern. "Good," I replied, pouring myself a glass of water. "The weather's beautiful." "You shouldn't exert yourself so much," Sylvia remarked. "Mokunak, you need more rest after the operation." "I feel fine," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "The doctors recommended moderate exercise. Walking is just what I need." "Still, be careful," Andrew said. "At your age." "At my age, people know what they can do," I interrupted. "They don't need constant reminders of their age." I walked out of the kitchen, feeling their eyes on me. I needed time to think, to plan my actions. Now that I knew their true intentions, I couldn't remain passive. In my bedroom, I sat on my bed trying to calm my raging emotions. Anger, resentment, frustration, all of it boiled up inside, threatening to burst out. But I couldn't let it. I needed a clear head right now. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Hugh's number. Maybe it was time to ask for help. Hugh answered after the third ringtone. "Richard, how are you, old boy?" "I've been better," I answered honestly. Is there something wrong with your heart? I could hear the worry in his voice. No, there's nothing wrong with my heart. It's my son. I briefly told him the situation, including the conversation I had overheard. What a bastard, Hugh said indignantly. I'm sorry, Richard. I realize it's your son, but it's all right, I sighed. I feel the same way. What are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. Legally, he seems to be right. I can't just kick them out the door. And physically, I'm not in the best shape for a confrontation right now. You need a lawyer, Hugh said. My daughter could help. She specializes in family law. I'm not sure I want to take this to court, I said, remembering Andrew's words. This is my son, after all. The son who's trying to get you out of your own house, Hugh reminded me. Look, Richard, I understand how you feel, but sometimes you have to defend your rights, even if it means standing up to the people closest to you. He was right, I knew that. But the thought of suing my own son made me deeply bitter. How had we gotten to this point? Where had I gone wrong in raising him? What had I done wrong? I remembered the conversation with Hugh at the hospital. His words that problems often start much earlier than we realize. Perhaps the roots of our conflict with Andrew went back a long way, back to the years when I was too busy working to pay enough attention to my son. Or in the months after Laura's death, when I wallowed in my own grief, not noticing how much the child was suffering. But whatever the reasons, the result was obvious. My son saw me not as a person to be respected and loved, but as an obstacle to his own happiness, an asset to be seized. That thought hurt, but it also brought clarity. I could no longer pretend that reconciliation was possible between us, that we could return to a normal father-son relationship. Andrew had made his choice. Now I had to make mine. You're right, Hugh, I said at last. I need a lawyer, and I'd appreciate it if your daughter could help. Great. I could hear the relief in Hugh's voice. I'll call Sharon today. She'll help you sort out all the legal details. We talked some more, going over the details. Hugh offered to let me stay with him or Sharon temporarily, but I declined. This was my home, and I wasn't going to give it up without a fight. After talking to Hugh, I felt a surge of determination. I'd been passive for too long, letting others decide for me. It was time to take control of my life into my own hands. I pulled a notebook and pen from my nightstand and began to draw up a plan of action. 1. Meet with a lawyer. Find out my rights. 2. Review the will, possibly make changes. 3. Find a way to document everything that goes on in the house in case it goes to court. As I was working on this list, I suddenly caught myself thinking that for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. Not just existing, but really alive. With a purpose, with a plan, with a determination to fight for what is rightfully mine. Maybe my son's illness and betrayal was the push I needed to snap out of the lethargy of the last few years. To remember that I was Richard Collins, a man who had spent a lifetime overcoming hardships and never giving up. I looked at the photograph of Laura, which I returned to the bedside table. She was smiling from the picture, young, beautiful, full of life. What advice would she give me now? I think she would say the same thing she always said when I was facing problems. Don't let anyone take away your dignity, Richard. Never. And I won't. Even if that no one is my own son. Sharon arrived the day after my conversation with Hugh. She was in a business suit carrying a leather briefcase, a real professional, even though she'd arrived on her day off. We met at a cafe near my house so Andrew and Sylvia wouldn't suspect anything. Hugh told me about your situation, she said as the waitress brought us coffee. I must say, Mr. Collins, it's quite common. It's not uncommon for relatives to try to take over the property of the elderly, especially after an illness. Please call me Richard, I asked. After all, your father is my friend. She smiled and nodded. So, Richard, first of all, I have to ask, do you own the house outright? No co-owners? No mortgage? The house is all mine. Paid off years ago, I confirmed. All the paperwork's in order. Taxes paid. Shuratornam. That's great. Now, about your son and his, partner. Did you give them permission to live in the house? I shook my head. I gave Andrew the keys when I went into hospital to check on the house from time to time, but I never said he could live there, much less with strangers. Sharon made a note in her notebook. They were right about one thing. Under Florida law, if a person lives in a house for more than 2 weeks with the owner's knowledge, they can't just be evicted. A formal eviction notice and possibly court action is required. How long does this take? A few weeks to a few months, depending on whether they contest the eviction. She looked at me. But there's good news. The law is completely on your side. This is your home, and no one can force you to leave it or sell it. I breathed a sigh of relief. For the past few days, I had lived in fear that Andrew would somehow be able to foreclose on my home. What should I do next? Sharon pulled some documents out of her briefcase. First, you need to prepare a formal eviction notice. Second, I recommend that you revise your will. She paused. Sure, Mon. I'm sorry to be blunt, Richard, but your son clearly expects to inherit the house. If you don't want that, it's worth making the changes. I nodded. The thought of disinheriting Andrew was painful but necessary. There's something else, Sharon continued. We need proof that they are living in the house without your consent, and that they have changed the interior and moved your belongings without permission. Photos, videos, recordings of conversations. Can I record our conversations? In Florida, the law requires the consent of all parties to record conversations. But you can take notes immediately after the conversation, capturing the date, time, and content. It's also helpful to take photos of changes in the home. We developed a plan of action. I was to document everything that happened in the house, to record any threats or pressure from Andrew and Sylvia. Sharon would prepare all the necessary legal documents. One more thing, Richard, she said before she left. Try not to escalate the situation. No confrontations, no ultimatums. Let them think you've made your peace. I promised I'd be careful. I didn't want any unnecessary conflict myself. My heart was still weak from the surgery. When I got home, I found Andrew and Sylvia gone, leaving a note on the fridge. Dinner at 7, lasagna in the oven, just heated up. Only Kira was home, sitting on the couch with her phone as usual. I decided to take advantage of the situation and take pictures of the changes in the house. Methodically going room by room, I captured on my phone camera everything that had been changed. New furniture, the absence of my things, rearrangements. In the garage, I photographed boxes of my belongings, many of which had been damaged by careless packing. When I returned to the house, Kira was still sitting on the couch, but now watching me with curiosity. "What are you doing?" she asked, addressing me directly for the first time. "Just seeing what's changed in the house since I've been away," I answered, taking a seat in the chair across from her. "Why aren't you with your mom and Andrew?" She shrugged. "I didn't want to go. They're watching some boring exhibit at the gallery." I nodded, not knowing how to continue the conversation. Kira always seemed so aloof, immersed in her own world, but now she was looking at me with some new interest. "Is this really your house?" "Ow," she asked suddenly. "Yes," I answered. "I've lived here for 40 years. Then why does Mommy say this is our home now?" I looked at the girl carefully. She was about 15, maybe 16, a difficult age, and from the looks of it, she wasn't happy about the situation she was in. "Your mom and Andrew have decided that you're going to live here," I said carefully. "But they didn't ask my permission." Kira frowned. "That's what I thought. It's all just kind of wrong." "What do you think about it?" I asked, surprised by her insight. "I don't like it," she answered honestly. "I liked our old apartment. I had friends there. Here I don't know anyone. And the school I was transferred to, they're all snobby." I nodded, understanding her feelings. Being a teenager was already hard enough, and the constant moving and new schools made it harder. "Does your mom know you feel that way?" Kira snorted. "She doesn't listen. She's too busy with her relationship with Andrew. And when I try to say something, she says I should be happy because we have a real family and a real home now." There was so much bitterness in her words that I involuntarily felt compassion. This girl was as much a victim of the situation as I was. "You know, Kira," I said, "sometimes adults get so caught up in their plans that they forget to ask their children what they want." "Yeah," she nodded, and for the first time I saw something like a smile on her face. "Right." We talked for another hour or so. I learned that Kira likes to draw, that she had an art class at her old school that she really appreciated, that she dreams of becoming a graphic designer. The new school doesn't have such a class and she feels lost. Maybe we can find classes or a studio nearby, I suggested. There are some good art schools in Clearwater. Really? Her eyes lit up. Do you know where? I'm not sure, but I can find out, I promised. There's probably information on the internet. We searched the internet together and found an art studio just a few blocks away that offered classes for teens on Tuesday and Thursday nights. That would be cool, Kira said, looking at the studio's website. But Mom probably wouldn't agree. She'd say it was a waste of money. What if I offered to pay for the course? I asked. After all, I'm your, uh, well, sort of a grandfather since your mom's dating my son. Aren't grandfathers supposed to spoil their grandchildren? Kira smiled, for real this time. That would be really cool. Thank you, she stammered. What should I call you? You can call me Richard, I suggested. Grandpa sounds too formal, and we're friends, right? Right, she nodded. Thank you, Richard. When Andrew and Sylvia returned, Kira had already gone to her room, and I was sitting in the living room pretending to read a book. In reality, I was reflecting on our conversation. Kira had turned out to be a smart and sensitive girl who just wanted to be heard, and perhaps in her I had found an unexpected ally. The next day I met with Sharon again, this time in her office. She had prepared 2 documents, a formal eviction notice and a draft of a new will. You can serve the notice on them today, she said, but I would recommend waiting until we have more evidence. As for the will, you need to decide to whom you want to leave your property, if not to your son, I wondered. So far, Andrew had been the sole heir in my will, made as far back as 15 years ago. The thought of disinheriting him completely was too painful. Maybe some kind of charitable organization? Sharon suggested, seeing my hesitation. Or perhaps you'd like to distribute the estate among several beneficiaries. I'll think about it, I said. It's not a decision that can be made quickly. Sharon nodded understandingly. Of course. In any case, a new will can be drawn up and signed at any time. In the meantime, let's focus on the more pressing problem of evicting the uninvited tenants. We discussed the way forward. I was to continue gathering evidence, documenting any changes in the house, any conversations that might indicate pressure or threats. Sharon would prepare any necessary legal documents. In a week, we would decide when to serve the eviction notice. After meeting with Sharon, I felt a new surge of energy and determination. For the first time in a long time, I had a concrete plan of action, a goal I was working toward. I was no longer a helpless victim of circumstance. Back home, I decided to take another step toward regaining control of my life. In the garage, amidst the chaos of boxes, was my vinyl record collection, more than 300 albums, collected over a lifetime. After Laura's death, I had abandoned the hobby, like so many other things that brought me joy. But now, standing among the boxes of my past, I thought it might be time to return to something I loved. I began to take the boxes apart, inspecting each record for damage. Thankfully, most were fine, protected by plastic envelopes. My turntable was here too, an old, reliable Technics I'd bought back in the 80s. I moved the turntable and the first batch of records into my bedroom, the only place in the house where I still felt like the master. I set the turntable on the dresser, plugged it in, checked it worked. Then I chose an album, Kind of Blue by Miles Davis, one of my favorites. As the first notes of So What filled the room, I felt the tension of the last few weeks begin to recede. Music has always been my refuge, my way of coping with the difficulties of life. And now, as I listened to the familiar melodies, I realized that a part of me that I thought was lost was still alive. There was a knock on the door, interrupting my immersion in the music. It was Kira. What is it? She asked, looking curiously at the record player. A vinyl record player, I answered. It's old technology, but the sound is much better than digital formats. Can I listen to it? She took a hesitant step into the room. Sure, I gestured for her to come in. This is Miles Davis, one of the greatest jazz musicians of all time. Kira sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the music with an expression of genuine interest. It sounds different, she said after a moment of silence. Not like Spotify. A warmer, livelier sound, right? I smiled, glad she'd noticed. Vinyl records retain all the nuances of the original recording that are lost in digital compression. Do you have a lot of those records? Over 300, I pointed to the boxes in the corner of the room. Collected them all my life. Cool, she nodded with genuine respect. Chumma, can I see what else you have? We spent the next hour going through my collection. Kira, as it turned out, was interested not only in modern music, but also in classic rock, and even some jazz artists. I showed her my most treasured albums. The Rolling Stones' original Sticky Fingers, with a real lightning bolt on the cover, the first edition of Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon, B.B. King's signed Live at the Regal. It's like a museum, she said, carefully going through the envelopes. There's so much history. Each record relates to a certain period of my life, I explained. Each one reminds me of something or someone. Schilbaum. Who signed this one? She pointed to an Ella Fitzgerald album. Ella Fitzgerald. I met her after a concert in Tampa in '73. Your grandmother, Andrew's mom, was a big fan. Wow. Kira looked at me with renewed interest. You must have seen a lot of these musicians live? Quite a few, I smiled, remembering the concerts we'd gone to with Laura. Theater tickets were much cheaper in those days, and you could see great performers without going broke. We continued to talk about music, and I noticed Kira gradually opening up, becoming more animated, asking more questions. She even showed me some contemporary artists on her phone, bands I'd never heard of, but which turned out to be surprisingly interesting. Our musical evening was interrupted by the return of Andrew and Sylvia. When Kira heard their voices, she jumped up as if she'd been caught doing something forbidden. I have to go, she said. Thanks for showing the records. That was cool. Come by any time, I offered. We can listen to something else. I've got just about everything that was popular before the early 2000s. She smiled and slipped out of the room, leaving me alone with my music and my thoughts. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm of forced coexistence. During the day, with Andrew working from home and Sylvia at work, I continued to rebuild my record collection while documenting everything that was going on in the house. I photographed interior changes, took notes on conversations, and wrote down dates and times. Kira would often come into my room after school, and we would listen to music or just talk. I learned more about her life, about her father leaving the family when she was 10, about how hard it was for her to adjust to Sylvia's new uncles, about her dreams of becoming an artist or designer. One day, as we were listening to the Beatles' Abbey Road, she suddenly asked, Richard, are you really going to evict us? I looked at her in surprise. Why would you think that? I heard my mom and Andrew talking about it. They said you must have consulted a lawyer and are preparing some papers. I sighed. So they guessed my plans. No wonder. Clearwater isn't such a big town, and someone could have seen me with Sharon. I want to take back control of my house, Kira, I answered honestly. That doesn't mean I want to kick you out on the street, but your mom and Andrew didn't ask my permission before moving in here and changing everything in my house. That's, wrong. She nodded, obviously agreeing. I understand, and I won't be offended if we have to leave. But, she hesitated, can I come to visit? To listen to records and talk? Her words touched me to the core. Of course, Kira. You'll always be welcome in my home. She smiled with relief, and we went back to listening to the album. A week after our first meeting, Sharon called me with good news. Richard, I spoke with Judge Harrison. He's an old friend of my father's and specializes in cases like yours. He's agreed to expedite our motion, given your medical condition and the fact that this is your only home. That's great news, I said. How soon can we file? It's all set, she said. I can file them tomorrow, but before that, we need to serve an eviction notice on your son and his girlfriend. Are you ready for that? I wondered. Am I ready for an open confrontation with Andrew? For his anger, accusations, perhaps threats? That he might try to turn Kira against me? But then I remembered their conversation about pushing me to move into a nursing home, how they planned to get rid of me so they could take possession of my house, and the determination returned. Yes, I said firmly. I'm ready. Good. I could hear the approval in Sharon's voice. I'll be there at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. It would be better if I handed them the notice in person. It will make a more serious impression. Andrew usually works from home on Thursdays, and Sylvia gets home from work around 6 in the evening, I said. Maybe it would be better to wait until the evening so they'd both be home. That's a great idea, agreed Sharon. Then I'll be there at 7 o'clock tonight. In the meantime, keep gathering evidence and take care of yourself, Richard. Don't let them pressure you or provoke you. I promised to be careful and hung up, feeling a strange mixture of anxiety and satisfaction. Tomorrow would begin a new phase of the fight for my home, for my independence, for my dignity. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I pulled an old photograph out of my nightstand drawer. Laura and I and little Andrew on the beach, all smiles, happy, carefree. A family that no longer exists. Looking at the photo, I felt the familiar sadness, but also something new. Determination. A determination not to let the memory of those happy days be tainted by the present. Determination to protect what is rightfully mine. Determination to start a new chapter in my life, even if it meant a final break with the old one. I carefully put the picture back in the drawer and turned off the light. Tomorrow would be a tough day, and I needed the strength to face it with my head held high. I woke up at first light, though I usually slept longer lately. Today was the big day, the day I would finally take control of my life. Lying in bed, I mentally prepared myself for the confrontation ahead. I knew Andrew wouldn't give up easily. He had inherited my stubbornness, but unfortunately not my sense of justice. At breakfast, I ran into Sylvia, who was getting ready for work. She was unusually friendly, which only heightened my suspicions. "Good morning, Richard," she smiled as she poured coffee. "How did you sleep?" "Not bad," I replied, pulling out bread for toast. "And you?" "Fine," she paused as if searching for words. "You know, Andrew and I were thinking, maybe we should have a family dinner this weekend. Invite some of your friends, maybe that." "Hugh?" Kira could make her specialty dessert. I almost choked on my coffee. After weeks of being virtually ignored, after overhearing plans to run me out of my own home, suddenly caring like this, something wasn't right. "Sounds good," I lied, determined not to give away my suspicions. "But let's discuss it tonight, when Andrew's home." "Sure," Sylvia nodded, finishing her coffee. "I've got to run. I'll see you tonight." After she left, Kira walked into the kitchen, already ready for school. She looked worried. "Richard," she said quietly, making sure we were alone. "Mom and Andrew had a long talk in the bedroom last night. I heard your name several times. They were talking about some kind of Plan B." I frowned. Plan B sounded disturbing. "You don't know what exactly they were talking about?" Kira shook her head. "They were talking quietly, but Mom seemed scared. And Andrew was angry. He said something like, 'If we can't do it the easy way, we'll do it the hard way.'" "Thank you for telling me." I tried to keep my voice calm. "Don't worry, it's going to be okay." She nodded, but the worry didn't leave her eyes. "I have to go to school. But be careful, okay? I promise," I smiled at her. After Kira left, I called Sharon to tell her about Sylvia's strange behavior and the mysterious Plan B. "Maybe they suspect something," Sharon said. "Or maybe they're just trying to put your guard down before they make their next move. Either way, be careful. Don't leave valuables or important documents unattended. And if you see anything suspicious, call me immediately." I promised to be careful and decided not to leave the house until she arrived. The day stretched slowly. Andrew worked in his office, my former office, and hardly showed his face. Only once did he come out to make himself a sandwich and cast me a strange look, a mixture of annoyance and some nervousness. At 6 in the evening, Sylvia returned, and Kira came in shortly after. Sylvia went straight to cooking dinner, humming something to herself with exaggerated nonchalance. I sat in the living room, leafing through a book, but really watching and waiting for Sharon's call. At exactly 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. I stood up, feeling my pulse quicken. The moment of truth had arrived. "I'll get it," I said, heading for the door. Sharon stood on the doorstep, wearing a business suit and carrying a briefcase. Behind her, I noticed Hugh, who winked at me encouragingly. "Good evening, Mr. Collins," Sharon said formally. "We had an appointment." "Of course," I stepped back, letting them into the house. "Come on in." Andrew came out of the study, hearing unfamiliar voices. "Dad? What's going on? Who are these people?" "Get Sylvia, please," I said, ignoring his question. "We're having an important conversation." Andrew frowned, but went into the kitchen. A minute later, they returned together. Andrew puzzled, Sylvia wary. "Have a seat," I pointed to the couch. They sat down, clearly confused by the situation. Kira appeared in the kitchen doorway, watching with anxious interest. This is Sharon Barnett, my attorney, I introduced, and her father, Hugh Barnett, who you might have seen in the hospital if you'd bothered to visit me. Lawyer? Andrew straightened up sharply. What do you need a lawyer for, Dad? Mr. Collins approached me in relation to a situation in this house. Sharon intervened, opening her briefcase. Namely, unlawful occupancy by unauthorized persons, without the owner's consent and substantial alteration of the interior, without proper authorization. What kind of nonsense is that? Andrew raised his voice. I'm his son. What unauthorized persons? Legally, you and Miss... Sharon looked at Sylvia. Sylvia Parker, she replied reluctantly. You and Miss Parker had no right to enter this house without Mr. Collins' express permission, Sharon continued, much less make changes to the interior, move his personal belongings, and so on. Dad, this is ridiculous, Andrew turned to me. Why are you doing this? We're trying to help you, to take care of you. No, Andrew, I shook my head. You're not trying to help me. You're trying to take over my house. I heard your conversation with Sylvia about pushing me to move into a nursing home, about how the house is practically yours already. Andrew's face changed from bewilderment to shock, then anger. You were eavesdropping on us. It's my house, Andrew. I have a right to know what goes on in it. Mr. Collins has prepared a formal eviction notice. Sharon pulled a document from her briefcase. Under Florida law, you have 30 days to vacate the premises. However, given the circumstances of the case, including attempts to psychologically pressure the owner and making unauthorized changes to the interior, we'll be applying to reduce that to 7 days. This is nonsense, Andrew jumped up from the couch. You can't evict your own son. I can, I said firmly, and I will if you don't move out voluntarily. Sylvia, who had been silent until then, suddenly laughed, a cold, unpleasant laugh. Do you really think you can win this case, old man? Against your own son? Any judge will side with us, especially when he finds out about your medical condition. Is that what you think, Miss Parker? Sharon smiled, but her eyes remained serious. I didn't mention that we have photographs and videotapes documenting any changes made to the house without the owner's permission, did I? As well as recordings of conversations in which you discuss how to evict Mr. Collins from his own home. It was a bluff. We had no recordings of the conversations. But Sylvia and Andrew didn't know that. Their faces spoke for themselves. They were scared. Dad, Andrew's voice was suddenly soft, almost pleading. Let's not do this. We're a family. We can settle this peacefully, without lawyers and courts. I agree, I nodded. We can settle this peacefully. You pack your things and move out, voluntarily without legal action, and I won't prosecute you for damages. Damage? Andrew was outraged. What damage? We've improved this house. It looks much more modern than it did before. It's not just about looks. Hugh, who had been silent until then, intervened. It's about respect for other people's property and personal space. You've invaded your father's house, changed it to your liking without asking his opinion. That's wrong, young man. After a long argument, Andrew and Sylvia agreed to move out within 2 weeks in exchange for my help with the down payment on the new apartment. Sharon prepared an agreement, which we all signed. The next 2 weeks passed in a tense atmosphere. Andrew and Sylvia hardly spoke to me at all. Only Kira kept coming into my room to listen to music and talk. She was worried about the move, especially about not being able to attend the art classes she had signed up for in Clearwater. I can help you find a good class in Tampa, I offered, and even pay for them if your mom's willing. Really? Her eyes lit up with hope. Of course she did. You're talented, Kira, and you deserve a chance to develop your talent. Unexpectedly, Andrew and Sylvia decided to move early. They found an apartment in Tampa that was available immediately. Moving day was stressful and emotional. Andrew hardly looked at me, only nodded briefly as he picked up the check for the promised amount. Sylvia didn't hide her contempt. I hope you enjoy being alone, she said goodbye, because Andrew will never want to see you again. Only Kira gave me a hug before she left. I'll miss you, she whispered. Thank you for the music and the talking. I'll miss you too, I replied, putting a note with my phone number in her hand. Call me whenever you want. She nodded, tucked the note into her pocket, and ran to the car. I stood on the doorstep watching them drive away. A strange mixture of feelings swept over me, sadness, relief, anxiety, and some unexpected freedom. Back in the house, I slowly walked around all the rooms. There were traces of their presence everywhere. Stains on the walls where their paintings used to hang, scuff marks on the floor, forgotten little things. The house looked foreign, unfamiliar, and I realized I couldn't stay here, where every corner reminded me of betrayal. 3 months later, I sold the house. I found a cozy apartment in the center of Clearwater, overlooking the bay and close to everything I needed. Hugh fully endorsed my decision. "Sometimes you have to let go of the past to move forward," he said as he helped me move my things. "A new place, a new beginning." Sharon helped with the legal aspects of the sale and purchase. She also insisted I revise the will. The bulk of it still went to Andrew, but with certain conditions. I also left a separate sum for Kira's education. My new life was gradually taking shape. I returned to collecting vinyl records, equipped my apartment with a special corner for my turntable and collection. I started attending the local jazz club, where I met several interesting people my age. Hugh visited often, sometimes with Sharon and the grandchildren. Kira called me regularly, contrary to Sylvia's expectations. We talked about music, about her art lessons, about her dreams of going to art college. Sometimes she even came to visit me when Sylvia was busy. I never heard from Andrew. I tried calling several times, but he didn't answer. I sent a birthday card. No response. It was painful, but I began to accept the possibility that our paths had parted forever. I realized one important thing. Sometimes the healthiest way out is to break up a toxic relationship, even if it's a relationship with someone close to you, even if it hurts, even if it goes against everything we've been taught about family and duty. My new house is smaller than my old house. There is no rose garden, no spacious living room for family gatherings. But there is peace here. There is dignity here. There is freedom to be myself without having to conform to other people's expectations. And there are new connections here, new relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. Hugh and his family, neighbors in the house, members of the jazz club, Kira, who I'm helping prepare for college. It's not the life I envisioned when I retired, but it's a good life. A life where I can look in the mirror without shame or regret. A life where I finally learned to respect myself the way I respect others.